Hello again, my dear students. Welcome to the second part of this overview of the second term um, aspects and main elements that we have uh, studied and contemplated. Um, okay, for this part, we are going to talk about Orr Easthouse's article, Becoming Bilingual is the Way of Life. Um, Before we do so, though, um, I'm really interested on telling you how challenging this whole thing is, like the whole online development and how you as teachers, well, teacher in my case, you're used to seeing your students' faces and um, you're used to some other ways of interaction. But the challenge is quite interesting as well. Um, so we are going to um, work with this text in the same way that we worked with the last one. And that is that I chose a very specific quotation from the text that I believe um, gives us everything we need to um, enter the other concepts within the article. So that quotation was at the very beginning, and it's becoming bilingual is a way of life. Your whole person is affected as you struggle to reach beyond the confines of your first language and into a new language, a new culture, a new way of thinking, feeling, and acting. So that's very, very accurate, very, very personal as well. I really like that definition. Okay. Um, then we are going to see something very interesting about that. Saying that becoming bilingual is a way of life, and it is because that's both positive and negative. Okay, for us, for the most part, we, um, I mean, I don't think we see a lot of negative effects about being bilingual. That we have been wanting to be bilingual for a long time. Um, so for us, something very good. But it is also important that you remember that being bilingual is negative for a lot of people. If you consider that those people have become bilingual or have to become bilingual pretty much to survive, okay? Because their language is just not, um, they are probably in a situation in which um, their language just does not help, right? Think about migrants, think about indigenous communities. So the fact that they become bilingual is pretty much a survival act rather than uh, a way of life, like being, I don't know, vegetarian or something like that, that it's something that you choose to do because it's something that you consider is positive for you, right? In this case, they're pretty much, um, they don't really have another option, right? So we have that. A you know dichotomy right there. Okay. Um, we have a very important mention on SLA, second language acquisition, in this text. It is very short, very interesting, and that is that that it's a field that um, has grown and that has been fed by other fields. Like we have, of course, linguistics, but we also have um, psychology. We have a little bit of sociology. We also have um, behaviorism, right? Um, discourse analysis. We have a lot of disciplines, sorry, that come here to this area, and throughout time, that evolution, right? Change has been going on along with the other fields. So, like, I mean, we can go all the way back to the grammar-based approach and how that was just, um, very, very intertwined with like classical behaviorism, and it's just a lot of these things are um, joined together, right? We have um, you have it in psychology, but you also have it here, and that's Watson and Skinner and Pavlov, right? Because they had an important, significance at their time, even in this field, right? Um, I mean, you have Auswell, and you have Noam Chomsky, and as you can see, we have a lot of fields within second language acquisition. Okay, but now research shows that there are three scenarios in which um, second language acquisition is developed, right? And that is the first one is when a person that belongs to a majority language community, a majority language speaking community, wants to learn another majority language, um, like a standard majority language. So, like, I mean, us speak Spanish. You know that Spanish is like second or third um, biggest um, like language in terms of speakers, and we're learning English. That's also a majority language, right? That's pretty much our case. And we also have minority language speakers trying to learn majority language, a majority language um, to many purposes, right? We've said that many times. I'm gonna say it before. We have indigenous people and my immigrants, people in trading that really need very, very fast ways to communicate, right? And then we also have some people who belong to a majority language speaking community who try to learn a minority language. I mean, in this case, we would be thinking about researchers, anthropologists, linguists too, who, I mean, they are studying and doing research with these communities, so like they need a way to communicate with them, and like also, of course, comprehend. Um, I mean, because you know that all languages are intertwined with uh, some sort of culture, right? But it is something very sad that there's no research, or there's just not enough research on like ethnic groups characterization. Um, so when bilingual education program is carried out with um, these kind of populations, they tend to be very submersive um, bilingual education programs. So like um, they don't tend to um, preserve the language, right? I mean, we have seen that a lot of languages keep disappearing, and well, that's something that um, it should be in the realm of this conversation. Okay. um, so now we need to talk about some definitions and identities, okay, in terms of being bilingual, and like within bilingual education and carrying out second language acquisition programs and so on and so forth, right? Um, so in order to have um, a current program in these areas, we need to combine the classic communicative skills, so listening, speaking, reading, and writing. These are, like, you have here the initials, right? It's just for me to save some time. Plus the Cummins cognitive competence, right? So we have those five competencies, right? Um, and we also have to include formal aspects of the language, such as pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, meaning, style, intonation, you name it, right? And when the teacher is skilled enough to have a balance, uh, both in including, right, uh, all of those competencies in um, the curriculum, but also um, in making sure that his or her students have uh, a balanced level in each one of those. Okay, and when the teacher is able to find the balance, then there's going to be a um, there's going to be more overall learning in the classroom, right? Then the text uh, talks to us a little bit about proficiency, right, and some of the models. But then again, I wrote it here. I mean, this is pretty much what we studied with Baker, and like Baker was pretty much um, compiling Cummins arguments and statements, right? So like here we will be talking about um, the common underlying proficiency theory, and the threshold theory, and so on and so forth. That's something that you already know, so I'm not gonna deepen on that. Um, and then this sorry this article finishes with a communicative language teaching approach and presentation, right? Because please remember that um, this article was also kind of a study that they did in Quechua communities in Peru, and where there are some bilingual education programs between Quechua and Spanish, right? But then again, I'm just not going to focus on that particular situation, but on the broader aspects, right? So we can uh, accept them and apply them, okay, to some other contexts in the future, okay? So it's a very important definition given by Brown that's cited on the article on communicative language teaching, right? First of all, very important that the classroom goals have to include all of the communication skills, so they have to be integrated, right? And of course, just like avoiding that traditional grammar-based approach, right? Um, so then we have another characteristics of the CLT is that there should be a language activities orientation, right? So we have some other aspects of language like pragmatic, that the language has to be authentic, functional, right? So that learners are immersed um, in an environment where um, meaningful communication takes place. Okay. Something very important in communicative language teaching is that there's an agreement between having fluency and accuracy. I know we have talked about a lot before um, on how, like, whether we should focus more on fluency or in accuracy, right? We know that it's better, or I mean, in order to fulfill a communicational um, goal, that we focus on fluency, right? But then we do have to find a place for accuracy at some point, at a certain level. I mean, fluency and accuracy, but they both have to exist somewhere in the classroom. Okay, and something very important also is that students should be um, they should be exposed to a spontaneous use of the language. Okay, um, we are trying to walk away from um, rehearsed situations, right? That classic example of the teacher who gives you um, uh, two pieces of paper and they go like, okay, so you're student A and you're student B, and you have to prepare a dialogue. I mean, of course, there's room for that in a classroom, yes, but then we really do have to find other ways for students to use the language, okay, and not just like trying to complete an exercise, right? And when the author, right, when Orr Easthouse um, goes and deepens on the study with the Quechua and Spanish learning situation in Peru, she presents some principles that are also from Brown, right? There are 5 principles, very interesting, that we should keep in mind. So the first principle is intrinsic motivation. Um, in this principle, we have that students should feel comfortable. They should feel um, in a relatively free space where they know and where they learn that they can uh, communicate their ideas and that they can express themselves. Okay, um, it's an environment that it's culturally interesting for them and like culturally relevant, and they find these ways to set up their own learning expectations, right? So they become actively involved in the dynamics in the classroom because um, they those dynamics appeal to them. Okay, so that is what uh, we should aim for in any classrooms, right? For students to um, become motivated, um, let's say on their own. The second principle is risk-taking behavior. I mean, of course, if they are comfortable in the classroom, they are becoming these little researchers who are always trying to learn new things, and they're always inquiring on things that that catch their eyes, right? And that really promotes and enhances the um, the learning, the overall learning in the classroom. Okay. Um, as for the third principle, um, when students are actively involved in learning a new language and culture, but also like where their language and culture is safe, they, I mean, according to the text, of course, they become, um, they like to show the things that they have learned to others. They become proud, both of their language and culture, but of the things they're learning. That is to say that to them, I mean, they have achieved or they are trying to achieve a balance in in the status that both languages and both cultures hold. So that principle is very important for that reason. Um, I mean, the fourth one is that there should come a point in which students are able to detect how to learn. Like they should be able to take control of their own learning by knowing how to learn. Um, and well, finally, we have self-confidence, which is pretty self-explanatory. Um, as they are comfortable, as they are assured and reassured that their language is safe and their culture is safe and that they're in a learning experience that doesn't really um, focuses on uh, the language learning itself, but in other kind of situation, other kind of tasks, um, their self-confidence increases and therefore their interactions and their learning in the classroom. Okay, so that was it. Try to sum up most of the elements in this reading. Of course, again, if you want to deepen on something, you have the material, but these are the key elements that I consider that you should um, maybe prioritize. Oof, sorry, priority, prioritize. Yeah, right. Um, as for this overview of the second term. Okay, so thank you very much and watch the next video.